Welcome back to the show. My name is Matthew Lucci, and this is The Truth. Apologies for the different video quality this time around. We have a lot to talk about, but we've also had a lot going on behind the scenes here at the American Liberty Media Network. From our website to our podcasts. I'm going to give you a quick update on our podcasts. Most of our podcasts, including mine, The Truth with Matthew Lucci, we're shifting over onto Spotify. So those are going to be audio only. We're going to have some clips available here on the YouTube channel as well as over on the Rumble channel as well. Links to all of that is available on our website, AmericanLibertyMedia.com, which you should definitely check out. We have lots of great news on AmericanLibertyMedia.com. As I'm recording this segment, we have American Liberty Media's 2024 Summer Reading List just came out yesterday. We have lots of great books on there. Make sure to check out The Fastest Tortoise by Ken Hirsch, The Wages of Destruction by Adam Tooze, For Cause and Comrades by James McPherson, Animal Farm by James Orwell, The Right Side of History by Ben Shapiro, and Raising Conservative Kids in a Woke City by Stacey Manning, The Presidential Rhetoric of Woodrow Wilson, Warren Harding, and Calvin Coolidge by my friend and mentor, Dr. Ben Voth, and Conscience of a Conservative by Barry Goldwater. That, in a very quick nutshell, is the summer reading list for American Liberty Media viewers. Check that out. We've got tons of other great articles on AmericanLibertyMedia.com. We have a great show ahead for today. We also have other shows available on our other platforms. If you do not follow us on Instagram, make sure to go over to Instagram and follow us. That's just at American Liberty Media. And on American Liberty Media, you will find our latest show, of which I'm the host. It's the news in less than 30 seconds. Every single day, 5 days a week, we come out with the top headlines, the things that you need to know for that day. Stay up to date on the news. Check us out, American Liberty Media, on Instagram. Wow. A lot to cover today. Big things happening. Most of this episode, the remainder of this, when we get over to our guest, Jake Wernette from Burleson, Texas, and then the commentary afterward, all of that was filmed last week. Why was all of that filmed last week? Well, the reason it was all filmed last week was because the Johnson County Republican Party and Johnson County Republican Volunteers, more specifically, the second group there, held a special meeting and stuff went down. Now, for those of you who do not live in Johnson County, Texas, Johnson County is the county that I grew up in and the county party that I've been involved with the longest here in the state of Texas. The Johnson County Republican Party has a lot of rules and restrictions on it, as do most county party organizations. They have rules and restrictions placed on them by the state party and in some cases by the National Republican Party. So, what does that mean? That there's some things that they are not able to do, some fundraising that they're not able to do, some political activities. Going out on behalf of candidates in the primary, you can't do that as a party until after that primary election date. Which reminds me, if you live in the state of Texas, double check to make sure that you do or do not have a party runoff going on right now. If you have a party runoff going on right now, early voting stretches through this week, and then election day is May the 28th. So make sure to get out, make your voice heard. In most districts here in the state of Texas, it's actually the primary that matters way more than the general because Texas is such a gerrymandered state. Whoever wins the primary is going to win the general. If we have primary runoffs, this is your opportunity in a lot of districts, from Congressional District 12 in Fort Worth and Northern Parker County, that's John O'Shea and Craig Goldman. Congressional District 23, that's Tony Gonzalez and Brandon Herrera, basically stretching from San Antonio all the way out to El Paso, Texas. If you live in El Paso, you're going to be in District 16. They do not have a runoff. If you're just east of El Paso, all the way from there to San Antonio, you will have a runoff going on. And there's a plethora of state races going on right now. SD 30 in North Texas, that's Senate District 30 in North Texas. That's Drew Springer's district. He's retiring. You also have District 58, District 97, District 54, District 21. Those are the ones that come to mind. I also know that Stephanie Click and David Lowe are in a runoff. Justin Holland, which I believe is District 33, over in Rockwall and South Denton County. All of those are going on right now. Get out, vote. Your vote matters 10 times as much as it did in the primary, and 10 times as much as it will in the general. The general, for all intents and purposes, in the state of Texas, most districts, the general doesn't matter. What matters most is the primary. Who wins the primary wins the general in the vast majority of districts in Texas. There's only a handful in South Texas that are even competitive come November. So get out and vote if you have not already done so. Early voting continues this week. Now, that said, Johnson County Republican Party has established an offshoot organization called the Johnson County Republican Volunteers. I'm going to refer to those as the JCRP, the party, and the JCRV, the volunteers. Now, lots of protocol was not followed over the last several years, honestly. And what happened this last week was an attempt by the Johnson County Republican Volunteers to refurbish a building owned by the Johnson County Republican Party. Again, a lot of these folks are the same people. A meeting was called because proper procedure was not followed. According to the leadership of the Johnson County Republican Volunteers. Never mind all of the policies and procedures that were not followed for years up to that point by the leadership of that organization. So we're going to talk to Jake Wernette here in just a minute when we get to that interview about what was going on, what this means for the county. But essentially, no resolution could be had in that meeting. I was there, several others were there, including our guest Jake Wernette. And ultimately, after several tense moments of back and forth conversation, which were caught on video, it became very obvious that the de facto leader of the organization, not the actual president, but the de facto leader of the organization, a man named Don Wilson, who used to be chairman of the party, is now married to the current chairman of the Johnson County Republican Party, that he had a lot of power vested in himself and was not willing to really work with anybody to get anything done. So one of the members, who happens to be a precinct chair in Johnson County, motioned to dissolve the Johnson County Republican Volunteers because it became very, very obvious that the vast majority of the folks in that room were not going to be able to get their voices heard. We're not going to be able to do things like repair the building. Not going to be able to do things in that vein, or even have access to a lot of the county's financials or the organization's financials. Things that had been brewing as problems within the Johnson County Republican Volunteers. So let's bring in Jake Wernette to talk to us about what this means, without going into too much of the specifics about what happened. In the future, I'll bring all of this out. I do want to wait until after the primary runoffs, because Johnson County is in State House District 58 in a race right now in the Republican primary runoffs between Dwayne Burns, who's been in office for about 10 years, and Helen Kerwin, who's backed by Greg Abbott, backed by Ted Cruz, backed by the lieutenant governor, backed by, I believe, the attorney general, and a litany of other very influential characters in conservative politics in Texas. So I don't want to get into the specifics here on this show, but we will discuss a lot of this stuff in the future. That said, let's bring on Jake Wernette. Here we go. Jake, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Matthew. It's good to be on with you.
Well, it's good to have you on here and good to see you again. For those who are unfamiliar with you, tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us a little bit about your activities in Johnson County. And also, you might want to mention that you're the host of a local radio show as well, and plug that while you get the chance.
Yeah, so my name's Jake Wernette. For those who have never heard of me, don't know me, I'm a precinct chair here for the Johnson County Republican Party. I'm also chairing the committee to get the Johnson County Young Republicans, the first of its kind, started in Johnson County. Stay tuned. We may discuss that later. I also host Let Freedom Ring at JoCo Community Radio, 4 to 5 p.m. on Tuesdays and Thursdays within the county here locally. We broadcast from JoCo Radio. So if anybody's interested, we do all things politics, foreign policy, those sorts of things. I got involved politically starting in college. I was a student senator for about several 10,000 students within the liberal arts college. I moved over to an associate Supreme Court justice. I was helping manage student grants to student organizations, about $150,000 worth to 53,000 students. And so that kind of got me started on the path when I discovered that running for city council was much easier than running for student senate. Since then, I've tried to get involved as much as I can.
Yeah, and so to that end, you and I were both at this specially called meeting of the Johnson County Republican Volunteers last
Yes.
night, which, as I've discussed already on this episode, is different from the Johnson County Republican Party. I think that it could only be described as an absolute circus last night. In
It
fact,
was.
it ended up with the Johnson County Republican Volunteers dissolving. From what you saw, how did we get to that point?
I think it was really a differential of leadership. I think the goals of the organization were not meeting the goals of those who were in the organization. I think it was also a hierarchical issue. I know we throw that a lot around these days to kind of rebel against leadership, but I really think there was a great paradigm, if you will, between what the goals and the aspirations of the executives were on that committee and those who were in the organization itself. I had talked to numerous members afterwards. This all started with a water leak, mind you, one that had had 2 years to get fixed. The leadership was denying every chance it could to bring in a contractor and get the water leak fixed. For 2 years, the organization, the committee, the building committee, all of those groups were trying to get something passed through the JCRV. The JCRV was tasked with helping the JCRP with this matter. To what I had understood from many conversations I've had with leadership executives, and the executive still denied any chance to let somebody come in and work on the building. I think really what it all boils down to is people just had enough. There was a great difference for so long, a lack of communication, rumors going around between the executives and the members. And I think it just ended with the members finally having had enough. And the people that they had put in charge of the group, that they had put in power to have the potential to have good leadership and good outcomes, just ended up with a cyclical proportion of self-fulfillment instead of actually getting the group's goals done.
Yeah, and what we saw last night was a pretty heated standoff between the former chairman of the party, who happens to be married to the current chairman, Don Wilson, and the new facilities chairwoman, um, a woman named Gina Balderrama. And it seemed like there was some not only tension, but there were factions forming last night. Um,
Yeah.
there was a lot more going on in that room than just one night. Uh, talk to me a little bit about what led up to what we saw last night, and then maybe we can get into one of these heated exchanges um, in particular, and see if we can break that down.
So when we're looking at what led up to this point, when we're looking at how we got this far, I think it really boils down to what somebody had described to me was the old guard and the new guard. For those who have watched videos of the Queen's Guard, you have the Coldstream Guards that move in and the others that move out. It's really procedural. It's really, I don't want to say peaceful, but it's rhythmic. You have sort of a predisposed movement to that. All goes down to organizational structure. Washington had talked about this between him and the Federalists that came in Adams' administration, a peaceful transfer of power. I really think what this ultimately leads up to is the question of how long is too long for somebody to remain in power, especially within a local political party. We've had people in local politics who have been in office really longer than our own congressman here in the 25th Congressional District. The current chair got in there. I think they've almost been involved with leadership there more than, say, Roger Williams or even some other executive officials have been in federal office. So what I think it really boils down to is when you have somebody that's been in there for so long and their goals no longer meet the goals of the party, no longer meet the goals of the committees that they have set up to help them run the operations, the people that are involved. And we have to remember this is a volunteer group. You can't come down as an authoritarian and force people to volunteer. You can't come down and have a big shouting match and think that this is a good image for the party, but recording it or these sorts of things is not a good image. The image starts with the people leading this. We think that the volunteers are kind of, think about an octopus, the tentacles of the octopus, they're very far reaching, but without the nucleus, the central brain, that being the headquarters of the party, you really can't have a good image. You really can't have a goal without somebody there to mediate the risks, the benefits, the goals of the party with the membership, or else it comes down to disarray, really. So I think the question that people need to start asking, knowing this, is exactly the same thing that I think led up to this point, is how long is too long for somebody to remain in the same position? Essentially, Don Wilson, Robin Wilson, I have nothing against them personally. I think there's some things that they've done right. They've definitely been involved as much as they can be. One of the reasons that people are hesitant to have Robin Wilson leave, and one of the reasons that nobody has really challenged her, I think, is because nobody has really come in and worked with the precinct chairs, done what precinct chairs do, and has all that experience. But really, what we've seen is nobody's passed it down. There's no training, formal training for precinct chairs. There's no way to kind of mold up new leaders to be willing to take that position. So I think regardless of the election, regardless of who runs against her, if she runs again, I think what it boils down to is there's a lack of formality there. There is no reason for anybody to move up. There's no reason for the old guard to leave yet because they've got their voting numbers. They've been in there. Nobody's challenging them. And so when you keep these members on the executive committee for so long that have worked with the county chair, if you will, the chair of the JCRV, they're there to sway the whole room. And at the end of the day, they're going to get their way unless we get new leadership in, new blood. So that's really what I think has led up to it.
Now, Jake, there's something that I really want to touch base on. You're obviously one of the youngest guys in the Johnson County Republican Party. You are the youngest precinct chair in Johnson County. One of the things that county parties across the state of Texas have found difficult, and really across the country have found difficult, is engaging that next generation. As somebody in that next generation? How can these established political structures reach out and bring in the next generation? Or are conservative values going to have to be refought, reconquered by a new generation of conservatives who basically have to rip leadership positions out of the hands of very entrenched incumbents at all levels? What's the future of the party?
The future of the party, as I see it, I'm not going to sugarcoat things. I'm not going to grease the plate here and say that everything's going to be perfect and beautiful for the next few years. We're going to have an uphill battle, especially against entrenched Democrats. What we've seen in places like my home state, where I was born in Arkansas, a young 18-year-old who had just gotten out of high school got bankrolled, got funded, got supported by the Democrat Party of Arkansas, and he's now the youngest mayor in Arkansas. So we have young people that want to do it. One of my friends in Miami, Florida, is one of the youngest chairwomen on a committee in my Miami-Dade County Republican Party. So there's definitely people that want to get involved. What we've seen, regardless of getting young people to get out and run for these positions, I ran for city council and got 30% of the vote. That showed me that at least 30% of the electors, the people in our city in Burleson, were willing to trust a young person in that position. So if we're talking about a third of the voters, really, I don't think it boiled down to just votes, but to publicity, name establishment. I have not lived here as long as the gentleman that got elected over me, but we have people, a great majority of our county and our city, that have already shown they're willing to trust young people with the right attitude. And I don't put it to a lack of people wanting to run. I don't put it to a lack of trust, but more so what it is I like to think, with discussions I've had with Sean, that has hosts another show on your network, me and him have kind of discussed the New Deal of the New Deal, if that makes sense. What we're seeing is an economy in shambles. We're seeing a new generation that rises up where security is more important than freedom. They have been given the image that capitalism sucks. They've been given the image that rather than policy and bad people running the system, it's the system itself that is kind of a degradation of our society, the emblemization of that, if you will. So the whole thing is we have to allow young people to come in. The biggest issue that I've seen with young congressional candidates, with people my age, is not the unwillingness of the community, but really the unwillingness of the party. You start to see factions when you run, and I challenge anybody, if they want to see this themselves, take a gambit at running, because you're going to see people degrade your image. You're going to see people come after you. You're going to see people say things against you. You're going to see doors closed on you for meetings and candidate forums. You're going to see people not set up tables for you. Really, to me, it all boils down to the willingness of the last generation of leadership. For too long, we've put credibility first. We've put image as more important than character. And so if you want to let young people run and let young people come in, as I've always said, there's a difference between giving them a chance when they're interested and forcing them to when they're not interested. Forcing young people to eventually get into the system that they have no idea what's at stake. They have no idea how the organization of a government works. We're talking about when the last generation dies off, the boomers that hold 70% stake in the government as it stands right now. Young people are not going to know anything when they get tossed in. They're forced to get in and run. So I think giving them the chance now, the most encouraging thing that we can do as a party, is to give them the choice while they're interested. Mm-hmm. Once we wait and it's been too long, they're never going to want to take a chance. They're never going to want to know how things work. It's just going to be one bad generation after the next.
And that brings me to what I guess is my final question for you here today, Jake. You are trying to put together a Young Republicans chapter in Johnson County. How's that going, first and foremost? And as a follow up to that, what relationship will the young Republicans have with the Republican Party of Johnson County, Texas?
It's going very well. I think we've got a great group of people. Usually, you don't see people that see young people as qualified to hold board positions or committee positions. I've kind of been forced to pick from people that I know, and that might be seen as a conflict of interest to some. But really, we have no youth involvement in this county. Being able to start from bare bones and build on the muscle and build on the nervous system of this new organization is going to be very hard, just going out and wasting time trying to find people that want to do it, that have the time. The best way that I've seen to do this is to come in and build up leadership and then let the elections take over from that point within the next 2 years. What we see here is there's a great interest. We had a 14-year-old whose mom came up to me. I work at the supermarket, comes up to me and says, my son's been trying to get into the Republican Party here in Johnson County. I was even a precinct chair. I left because of the factions that were forming 10 years ago. And she said, now my son is really wanting to get interested. And the only thing that they told him he can do was a poll greeter.
Wow.
And he said, I have nothing against being a poll reader, but I want to get involved and lead from a young person's perspective. I want to be able to get out and volunteer and lead something. Mm-hmm. And so I reached out to his mom. I said, look, you can bring him on. We'll make him our youth initiatives leader. The youngest kid ever, I would say in probably this country now, is wanting to get involved, and he's coming to the meeting May 27th. We're having a non-public luncheon. We're going to have the former chairman of the JCRV, now dissolved. We're having the vice chair of the county Republican Party coming to meet these young leaders that I've kind of wanting to build up the young Republicans. We've got 2 people that are exquisite, have taught themselves coding, know computers inside and out. One that's built his own system that works for the local Hyundai dealership. We've got one that is great with programming. He has been in band his whole life, but he's real good with social media. He has helped manage social media for numerous organizations, especially the high school band. We're bringing them on as media advisors. We're bringing the other one on as kind of a recruitment director. We've got folks that have been mentored by Wall Street professionals. We're bringing him on, another Gen Zer, to be our finance director. We've got some more local candidates that were young. Here in the last cycle, we're bringing them on as policy directors, as chairs for groups that we want to set up. We have great interest for this. And you ask what my hope is for this. Where do I see it fitting in with the paradigm between the county party and what could have been the JCRV? I'm hoping that it doesn't come to that as well. I don't think it will, because we are engaging the next generation. The problem with the JCRV was it didn't engage a new generation of leadership. Whether it was the same generation of people, that's the big issue. So where I see it fitting in, I would like to see it as an independent organization. That way the county party can't influence it completely. I would like to work and build as much cooperation as we can with the county party to build up positions of leadership. The goal is to work with student councils, mayor's youth councils, city councils. That way 14 to 25 is a real big age range. So given 4 years after high school, we're hoping that the people that we can engage in student councils and mayor's youth councils, that we can get them to run for city councils, that we can get them to run for precinct chairs, to fill in the gap. We have 27 precincts that have not been filled in this county. And so after June elections, I'm sure that'll even out. But we really have problems with people wanting to do that. There wouldn't have been anybody to run for my precinct had I not. So the hope here is that we can gauge the interests of young people, use their talents to their advantage, not to ours, and to get them involved in as much leadership capacity as we can.
Yeah, absolutely. Jake, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
It's been my pleasure. How can people learn more about the Johnson County Young Republicans? And then how can people hear more of you on JoCo Community Radio?
So I host a show, Let Freedom Ring. It's live on Facebook. It's live on YouTube, 4 to 5 p.m. on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Let Freedom Ring is on the JoCo Community Radio Facebook, YouTube. We also have it on Spreaker and the station app, JoCo Community Radio app. If anybody's interested, they can go on anytime. Spreaker, Facebook, and YouTube have the archive episodes, so you can go back and watch any of the previous episodes that we've done. Matthew has been on our program quite a bit when he ran for Congress. So if you're interested in seeing the heyday of that show, where we have young leadership coming up, why it's good to have young leadership, those are the discussions that you need to see. To learn more about the Young Republicans, we're setting up a few social media accounts coming up. We're really in the beginning, the infant stages of starting this. We're working on getting it registered with the state, Young Republicans, with their council of executives. So within the next 2 months is our time frame. We want to have this set up within the next 2 to 2.5 months. That way, before the end of the summer, we can start putting out news for the next year for young people, coming up with a schedule of events, fundraisers, those sorts of things. We've got a really great family-friendly fundraiser in the works that young kids love. Blue-collar jobs when they're young. You know, you want to be a construction worker, a garbage truck driver, a fireman. We're going to be working with a lot of cool groups to set up a fundraiser that I've got in mind. As of right now, the best way to stay in touch is to reach out to me through Facebook, to reach out to me through the station. The station can put you in touch with me. We're going to be working on a lot of stuff. So right now, we don't have an official communique for the Young Republicans. They give us 2.5 months. We can come back on here. We can come back on the station. We'll let you know all the ways that you can get in touch. If you have kids, grandkids that want to get in touch with us, let us know, because that's the most important thing right now, is that we can get people interested.
Absolutely. And I'll include some of that contact information down in our show notes and our video descriptions. For now, Jake, thank you so much for the work that you're doing in Johnson County. And thank you so much for taking the time to come on today.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you so much to Jake Wernette for coming on today. Go check him out on JoCo Community Radio. He's got a show every Tuesday and Thursday from 4 to 5 p.m. We'll link that down below. We'll put it in the show notes. We'll put it in the description of this video. Check him out. Also, get involved in your local party. Right now, the Johnson County Republican Party is an absolute mess. What we learned from this is that if you want people to be involved, if you want folks to continue to fight for our conservative values, you have to bring them in and let them do the work that you brought them in to do. Yes, we have to follow procedure. I've argued for that over and over and over again on this show, when I was out campaigning for things, and all the different groups that I'm involved in. We have to follow procedure. In addition to that, we also have to be working to bring more folks into the party, more folks into our conservative groups and our conservative organizations. And then we can't run them off when we dislike the things that they say, or the things that they do, or the way they want to approach things. If they are conservative, acting on conservative values to help us build the party, we have to work with them. We can have disagreements. You know, it was Gerald Ford who famously said, we have to learn to disagree without being disagreeable. I'm not seeing a whole lot of that going on in our local parties. And I think that that's something we have to be working on as conservatives. I also think that one of the things that we have to do is figure out how we can have intense disagreements and still work with one another. Unfortunately, the reason why the Johnson County Republican Volunteers dissolved last night was because over the last several months or several years, you had a handful of individuals who refused to allow the organization to work without their control, without their fierce control. And when people stood up to disagree, it would always turn into a heated argument. The members of the JCRV, the Johnson County Republican Volunteers, grew tired of this. They saw last night that there was no hope to salvage the organization after months and months of trying to salvage the organization. The motion was put on the table to dissolve the organization, seconded, and won by a majority vote. There is no more volunteers organization for the Johnson County Republican Party. The Johnson County Republican Volunteers side of the Johnson County Republican Party has no organized structure anymore, because those who ran the organization at the very top would not listen to those who were working on the actual day-to-day volunteer work. Those who were working on maintaining facilities, on promoting conservative candidates, on any litany of items from finance committee to research committee to marketing, that those at the top wanted to say in absolutely everything and would get upset when things were not done their way. In essence, prohibiting real conservative volunteers from doing the work that they volunteered to do. That went on for way too long, and the Johnson County Republican Volunteers story should be a warning to the rest of the country and the rest of our movement that we have to learn to work together, or we will dissolve. And in this, we're going to lose a lot of great people who want to be very politically involved, who are fighting for the right things. We're going to lose those people. We're going to lose a lot of those people. We have to learn to work together. I'm going to include some information for Jake Wernette down below, his show, and always, always, always be on the lookout for ways to get involved. God bless you. God bless the United States of America. We badly need it. I'll see y'all later.